didn't sound the best, and now our key's stuck. That is not what I expected. Come on, key. Will it do it? We got one cylinder that fires. Ooh. That's very, very smoky. Pretty darn disgusting. So, would have been pretty bad to try and pump through the engine. Howdy my friends, and welcome to the channel today. I'm Luke, Thunderhead289 here on YouTube, and today we're gonna try and get this 1968, 69, not even sure what year it is, Volkswagen Beetle here behind me. It was restored back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then, you know, some things happened and it ended up parked. So today we're gonna try and see if we can get it running and driving and back on the road. Now at a glance, this is a pretty nice old Volkswagen. Has a pretty good paint job, pretty decent restore on the thing. I think it was originally red. It's really kind of hard to see, but it might be red primer too, but they did a good job to go through and actually, you know, paint all the door jambs and everything if it was a different color. Pretty darn rust-free car. Obviously it's sat a long time and some of the mold and things are starting to get to the interior. Has a good mice smell to it, but it's your typical 4-speed Volkswagen. And actually, for once, Volkswagens never have doors that shut good. All right, and this one shuts really nice. So, you know, it was a pretty decent car. I had a hard time not picking it up when I did see it for sale a little while back. Has a, I can't remember if it's a 1500 or 1600, but it is a single port engine. So it's a little throwbacky, and I know there's some stuff that kind of goes on with the doghouse and different things. They're a little more undesirable on the single port, but we'll get more into that. At first, I know that it has gas in the gas tank, and it absolutely reeks. So we're gonna have to handle that, and hopefully we still have a good gas tank. But you know, whatever's, it's got quite a bit in it, and it's definitely been there for a while. So first things first, we're gonna have to get that out of there. Now, not that your old school American stuff is more difficult to work on, but everyone says Volkswagens are easy to work on. In this way, you know, I would have to agree with them, where instead of going through the filler neck, you know, I can just pull our little sender unit out and get really good access to whatever turpentine is in the gas tank at this point. So we're just going to use an old fuel pump. I keep these around after they quit making pressure, but they still work good as a transfer pump, especially if you put just a directional valve on the end of the suction line. So that coupled with a good old jump pack, and we should be doing really good. Now there's probably going to be a lot of things throughout the time I'm working on this Volkswagen here that are going to stress you Volkswagen aficionados out quite a bit. You know, I'm like a V8 American car, manual transmission, hot rod guy, but my wife really loves these Volkswagens. You know, it's like she's loved them ever since she was a kid, and this is our third attempt to put one together for her that works and she can have fun with. Now this is probably our best attempt. Ooh man, taking that screw out, it reeks like bad gas in here. But anyway, so hopefully we get this settled out for her. And you know, I really want to not like these, but you know, it seems like when I work on them, I just fall in love with them again. And maybe that's why all you guys that really like Volkswagens, you know, maybe that's why you're as into it as you are. So I was lucky enough to get a third chance here, and hopefully we make good on it. half expected our float to be rotted away, so that's already a win. The smell could about knock you off your feet. So I got a clear container here just to unload some of this gasoline into, or turpentine, or whatever it is at this point, you know, just for fun to see it in the daylight. You know, I'm sure it's absolutely disgusting if it's anything like it smells in there, but you know, to be expected after it sits for 10, 15, 20 years. And it's kind of an interesting, irregular backstory as to why this car got parked. And I'll probably get into it more as we get into the video, but, you know, let's just get a fire extinguisher. This seems awful close to whatever that is, probably still mildly flammable. There's a hood there. Or a trunk, or whatever you call it. All right, we got our fire extinguisher here just in case anything goes weird. And you can get a good look here at what that kind of looks like. Pretty darn disgusting. So would have been pretty bad to try and pump through the engine. So just a comparison here of what was in the tank versus, you know, gas that I have around the farm here that actually runs an engine just fine. You know, relatively new, within the last 5 months probably. You can see the difference here. You know, other than it looks like now I'm carrying around jugs of urine in my garage, you know. This old stuff is seemingly quite a bit more viscous and kind of almost has a gel effect to it, where our normal gasoline is much less viscous. But all of that aside, you know, it looks like the Volkswagen could probably stand to drink a little more water. You know, this is more along the healthy lines of what you would expect for good fuel. So with that, we'll finish getting that pumped out and we'll fill it with fresh gas. I just kind of like using this period correct gas can. So any opportunity I have to use it, even if it's completely nonsensical, like right now, you know, I don't know. I just enjoy using the thing. All right, I think that concludes our work up front at the moment. It'd be nice to roll the car forward so I could get access to the trunk or hood or whatever you want to call this back here more easily, but we got some flat tire action going on, and unfortunately I don't have an air compressor. I recently broke mine and I had been using this engine pump, but we don't have a running engine in this garage at the moment to use to air the tire up. So I literally think I'm going to air it up really quick by hand with a bicycle pump. So stand by, this will probably take me a little bit, but I'm going to have one really ripped shoulder by the end of this, I imagine. Oh boy, here we go. I should probably stop now because the car probably would roll, but I'm committed. I think that's enough of that business. Looks like it got to like, I don't know, 20 PSI. I don't even want to tell you how many pumps that took to get there. So we're just going to move on and never do that again ever in my life. But I guess it could be done. In dystopia, end of the world, you didn't have an air compressor and you had a flat tire, you know, as if that would be the most important thing. Put this thing in neutral so we can roll it forward. You guys really haven't had a good look at the interior yet. Whatever year this is, it's much less ornate than the, you know, earlier 60s models. So, you know, but still a pretty decent looking Volkswagen. Somewhere along the line, someone got pretty wild with a radio, and it's got some speakers in the kick panels, which is pretty nice, albeit I doubt it works after all this time, but we'll see. So first, second, third, fourth, it is in neutral. The brakes do nothing, so that'll be fun to figure out. But feels like very much so a German car, right down to the questionable 9mm casings on the floor. Such a light car. All right, now we got pretty good access to the back end here. You can see it's just a pretty darn clean old Volkswagen, you know. Doesn't really seem abused like most of them were, but I'm gonna get the air filter housing pulled off here. You know, I don't know what's inside that, probably a whole bunch of goop and garbage. There's a good chance none of this, there's gonna be an issue somewhere. You know, I'd totally expect it after all this time, but I think at this point we can at least throw a battery in it and hit the starter and, you know, just see what'll happen. And we're not gonna damage anything too terribly bad. And it does, I have rotated around here before. Oh, it's in gear, check that out. These cars are just so light. One of the things here that people claim to be, you know, easy about Volkswagens that I don't particularly like. Let's just appreciate this door one more time. Look at how nice these shut. Okay, I won't bring that up again, but I've never had a Volkswagen with the doors that shut decent. Anyway, back to our battery deal here. Come on, seat. So the battery is located under the passenger side of the rear seat here. See if I can give you a good angle. So, you know, comes with its issues. A lot of times it rots out the floor. This looks like someone has the red cable on the wrong side there. As you can see, it goes to the ground, so I want to make sure I don't hook that up to positive. But you know, this is pretty subject to fire. I actually see one of these little covers sitting back here because these seat springs would contact across the battery terminals and then create a dead short, and then, you know, you have this massive Volkswagen fire. And my favorite part about battery fire stories is it usually happens when someone is sitting on top of the battery in the back. You know, it pushes the springs down, they touch the battery, and then all of a sudden they have an instant seat heater that they didn't ask for. All right, our brand new 2013 battery is all in here. So red to negative, because that's how you're supposed to do it, and then black to positive. You know, I could see someone very easily mixing those up, so I won't be surprised if our generator is blown at some point. Check out what this little cover says. Basically, it's a warning about these springs touching the battery, and you're supposed to put this over the positive to prevent it, because that's going to really help. I added a couple of jump packs here for extra fun that are fully charged up, so we should be able to spin this little lawnmower engine over. Now, one thing I'm concerned about, which I have been ever since I bought the car, is, you know, at some point you would fight compression, and you kind of do. It rotates, you know, without any grinding, but, you know, I can turn it easier than I have on Volkswagens in the past, so, suspicious. And if you're a Volkswagen guy and familiar with Volkswagen valve train, you probably already know what I might be thinking. So, is that the case? I don't know. We're about to find out, but I've experienced it before, and it's a pretty unsavory scenario if that's what's going on here. Hopefully not. All right, here we go. Assuming our clutch isn't seized. It actually just ran. How did it get fuel up there that quick? Wonder if that's the turpentine. Didn't sound the best, and now our key's stuck. That is not what I expected. Come on, key. Will it do it? We got one cylinder that fires. We might actually not have to do too much. Holy crap. That's way better than I thought it would be. Aw. I think it's stuck in gear, unfortunately. It's trying to move forward. Something's kind of fishy. If I can figure out how to work the key. That's first, that's second. the linkage is moving, and I can feel the detents of the gears. This should be neutral, but if I let up, oh, there we go. Must have just been the gear oil drag in the automatic, or the manual rather. All right, generator light went out. That's good. Sounds like garbage, but it does run. Oh, good grief. I forgot this oil bath air filter on here. Come on. That's probably full of junk. You could hear the engine change. Set that down. That's super dangerous to have on a Volkswagen. Between the battery and fuel filters and this brass fitting that goes into the carburetor pulling out, pretty much what causes... Ooh. That's very, very smoky. That's pretty much what causes all the engine fires, I was gonna say. Let's just take a look at what we're dealing with. Looks like we've been dropping a lot of oil on the exhaust, so that's fun. A moment of peril there, but I think we're okay. It's probably a good leaker, like every Volkswagen engine I've ever seen. Smoked the place out here pretty good. It did run, and then when I went to start it there after our first run, it's like it has no ignition. And you know, it's probably just the points or corroded and whatever, so it does seem like it's pretty okay. But one thing I noticed when I came back here to look under the cap, check this out. Whee! So the ignition timing is who knows where. So we'll do a little bit of tuning on this. Someone was kind enough to first incorrectly mark top dead center, and then over here correctly mark top dead center, so you can see the little bit there. So we'll get the cap off, sand the points, because I'm sure they're gacked. Maybe we'll get the cap off. There we go. I feel like there's supposed to be a dust cover under there. This feels like a mechanical advance mechanism and then coupled with a vacuum advance, which if you're a, you know, typical American car guy, that's not super strange, but I can't say I've seen that in a Volkswagen before. And I'll have to look, but this might be, it looks like it's going to Venturi vacuum, so I'm sure timing and ignition is all whacked out. So a little bit of cleaning and tuning here will probably go a long way. This is the best start I've ever had to a Volkswagen project, okay? You know, I don't want to be overly optimistic, but this is going way better than the other two cars did. At least it seems like there's a functional core of an engine and the whole bottom of the car isn't falling off, so winning at the moment. Now this is pretty standard op for classic car people, although most of us have moved to some form of electronic ignition. But if you're into this stuff, ultimately you've probably messed with points before. They're a very simple ignition system that all they do, so let's get this out of here. It looks clean enough. So as the engine rotates, there's a little piece that rides on this lobe. And basically when it gets to a high point, it opens this contactor. Now this is attached directly to the ignition coil's ground. So basically it breaks the ground connection to the coil, and then the coil discharges voltage through the secondary windings, goes through the your main coil wire, comes into your rotor, it redirects it to the cylinder, and then, you know, the spark goes on its merry way. So super simple. I wouldn't call it the most reliable, but it's very robust and easy to deal with. And after years and years, a little bit of cleaning, it will still work, where electronic ignition gets pretty questionable with some of those electrical components. So anyway, I think this is good here. I am pretty sure if you're familiar with Volkswagens, this is supposed to have a a dust cover here, but this one doesn't. So that seems like someone just pitched it. I've been trying to figure out how this vacuum advance works, if it is an advance or retard mechanism or whatever, because Volkswagens, you know, they just really don't play by the rules. So they've been known to do weird stuff different than our typical American cars do. But it seems like the vacuum advance mechanism does work, albeit the original tubing here is completely clapped and doesn't hold a vacuum whatsoever. So that probably doesn't work, but the vacuum advance canister itself does. And then it also has mechanical advance. And again, I've never seen this in a Volkswagen distributor. Usually it's like the 009, it's mechanical only, or it's a vacuum advance only and it's hooked to Venturi vacuum, which I believe this was. You know, your Volkswagen people are probably going crazy if I'm wrong, but I think up here this is Venturi vacuum. So the more you'd open the throttle, the more timing you would have, which with how this distributor is laid out, I don't think that's what you'd want to do. You know, is this the original distributor? I don't know. You know, we're just going to make it work the best we can. So let's get the timing light out here. And as long as we adhere to correct engine principles, a Volkswagen engine, a Ford V8, a Chevy V8, an engine is an engine is an engine. Ignition timing works the same way on all of those. All right, so I think we're ready to go. We're hooked to spark plug number 1, which is way up here with our timing light. Got a little bit of a redneck menagerie going on here with a jump pack, but as much as I would love to get these cords wrapped up in the fan belt rather, or a generator, I guess there's a fan in there. Anyway, we don't want to get that all wrapped up there. I got a vacuum gauge hooked to what I think is actually a timed vacuum or ported port. So we're going to test that out. So if it idle without any throttle input, this vacuum is 0. Then we give it some throttle and we have a vacuum signal, manifold vacuum. That'll be pretty handy for doing some really fancy ignition timing things. So I'm hopeful for that. Looking in here, it's no surprise this is loose. You know, I didn't take a very close look in the beginning, but you know, the Volkswagen has actually a few timing marks. You can see one there. And this is actually one here as well. This is TDC, and you want to line it up with the, you're looking for your timing marks rather on the center line of the case of the engine. So this side of this little nub, this is actually that they have marked here, and what they're in line with is 5 degrees after top dead center, I believe. And then this is some variation here, but basically I'm gonna really highlight our TDC mark really well. And then this is a dial back timing light, so we don't need all of those other marks. We just need TDC, and then we can figure out all of our timing events. All right, this is the mark that we want. So see if we can eyeball this. There we go. So that is what I want to be looking for TDC, and it's really hard to see on the original crank pulley here, but there's a little divot that kind of denotes where TDC is. And you know, I don't know a lot of this Volkswagen stuff, you know, just offhand, off the top of my head, but I have this really nice thing in my pocket called a cell phone that has the internet on it. And, you know, instead of just guessing or asking Facebook and getting a bunch of ridiculous answers, I just looked it up. And so then you know where cylinder 1 is, what the balancer is supposed to look like, all those things you can just figure out for yourself. So, you know, we live in a world where if you want to act helpless, it's definitely your own doing. There's just so much info out there. Anything you want to do in this life at this point, you can figure out how to do it. Probably need to make sure it still starts here. I'm sure it's good and flooded from the ignition being, you know, the way it was. Oh, some popping action. It's a good sign. This key is very finicky. Gotta hold your tongue in your mouth just right. There we go. There we go, getting somewhere. There we go. I don't don't know if you guys could see from the video there, but color me impressed. That thing was idling at 10 degrees after top dead center. I've never seen an engine be able to handle that before and actually run, so good grief almighty. I don't know if I should be impressed or afraid. Stands to reason it's probably a pretty healthy engine yet. I think this is Venturi vacuum here. We're hooked up to it, and the more throttle we give it, the more vacuum it has. You can see it's kind of proportional to airspeed. Makes sense because it's plumbed right in here, right into the Venturi area. So I don't know if that's, with this being a classical vacuum advance, I don't really know if that's what I want to be doing with it. Other than that, I mean, dang, the thing runs pretty good. It's amazing what reasonable ignition timing will do. And everyone always thinks more advanced means more power. It's not about how much ignition timing or how little, it's just about having the right ignition timing, igniting that mixture at the right time in the cylinder stroke. So there's no other rules other than that. An engine is an engine, and if you're igniting the mixture at the right time, it's gonna run as good as it possibly can, whether it be a Volkswagen or an American car like this Gremlin, or a supercharged car like my 65 Galaxy. All the same principles. And I have literally never owned a Volkswagen that wasn't wore out and didn't smoke like a banshee. Just check this out. And listen to that carb whistling away. This thing's pretty healthy engine. Super cool. Super pumped about it. This car's really thrown up the dust here. I'd have the garage door open so I wouldn't asphyxiate myself, but it's 30 degrees outside and I'm just not about that. Asphyxiation, freezing to death, I don't know, pick your poison. I'd rather not be cold though. So it seems like our ignition is working pretty good. The engine is fairly responsive. Some of the ignition stuff is a little gummed up, but it does seem to work pretty good where the engine now starts and idles, and I don't have to fiddle with it too much. The carburetor was a little bit out of whack, so you know, our ignition is decent enough to move on to address the carburetor. Now we can kind of tell what is and what isn't. And so these are kind of interesting, where they have this big screw here on the VW carburetors is basically a bypass, so that's for controlling your idle speed. And then above it, this little screw is a mix screw. So a good starting point with those is 2.5 turns out. And then it's a big misnomer with non-VW people or anyone that didn't do any Googling that they'll get buck wild on this adjustment screw, and this is just for your choke. And basically with the choke, my understanding is all the way off. You want to run it in to where it's just barely engaged with this lever. If you start really engaging it and actually opening the throttle with this screw, you start screwing up how this is designed to operate and basically the whole geometry of the carburetor itself. So, you know, it's a huge mistake that people seem to make to play with that for idle speed. But anyway, so we've made our 2.5 turn adjustments on everything. See if we can't get it to fire up. Hopefully I don't eat my words here. There we go. Now right off the bat, that already seems to be quite a bit better. It's actually pretty respectable. Revs out decent, returns to idle. Isn't running too rough. I think we have a little bit of adjustment to do here. It smells a little rich. I'm just gonna slide in here. See if we can't catch the index of the screw. There we go. Just gonna lean it up, turn it clockwise ever so slightly. Oh, see, that's too lean. And you can hear the engine respond as you make changes. That's too rich. Seems pretty happy right there at the moment. Too much idle speed. Right about there is okay. About caught my pants on fire. Man, it is just running rock solid. Pretty happy with that. It's about all I can take here. It looks like I'm crying. Well, I guess my eyes are, I got something in my eye and it's exhaust. So I think we're gonna shut it down here. There we go. Man, I'm pretty happy with the way that's running. I think we should figure out why our brakes don't work and see if we can't go for a drive. That's pretty good. So we've been on kind of a roll here and things have been going well, but I think this is the part that slows the process down. So you can see the brake pedal goes all the way to the floor. Granted, I haven't tried the clutch pedal, so who knows what the situation is with that if the transmission actually works, but I'm hopeful with what I've seen. And given the narrative of why it was parked, I would believe that all that's fine. Now this is something that when you park a vehicle for a long time, it tends to happen. And I've had to fix this on several VWs that I've had that, of course, they've all sat for a long time. But the reservoir for the master cylinder is up here. You can see that we have fluid in it, which I was hoping we didn't. Down here is the master cylinder. You can kind of see the end of it. Now, I've had this issue with a lot of cars that sit, you have to get the brakes working again, and I've thought it was the master cylinder numerous times on these where I change it, then it still doesn't work. And what seems to happen, if you can see this little rubber brake line here, is that when these sit for a long time, it's almost like these rubber brake lines internally swell and kind of fall apart, and then basically fluid cannot move through them. So I've changed master cylinders, it didn't fix it, and ultimately it worked out to be the lines. And I bet you that's what's going on this Volkswagen right now. Now that's all well and good, but I'm growing impatient and this car runs so well. I just want to drive it up and down the road here to see what I have and what I don't have. And I live out in the boonies, so you know, this really isn't where it's dangerous for other people. It does have a functional handbrake that I just tested. So I believe at least at low speeds, I can putt around okay, and I probably likely won't even see another person on the road, let alone get into any sort of traffic scenario. So this is safe for me. You know, if I just wouldn't recommend anyone else doing it. Most of the time I wouldn't recommend anyone doing anything I'm doing. But all of that aside, so I think I'll change the oil here, clean out the oil bath air filter and refill it with oil. And we'll pull this thing out of here. All right, we got the oil changed here, and as much as I love oil bath air filters, which I'm not kidding, I really do like the concept of them, this one in particular has a thermally controlled little air door, and I'm just not sure if that would work anymore, and I really don't want to suck a bunch of oil down into the engine itself. So in the meantime, we have a piece of shirt as a means of filtration. As if there wasn't already enough fire hazards, why not add another one? But I don't know, better than driving without an air filter on a gravel road, I suppose. That was a pretty monumental moment you saw there. That's the first time I've ever moved a Volkswagen under its own power, and I've owned 3 of them, this being the 3rd. The clutch flywheel is definitely rusted up pretty good. It's pretty grabby, but it does work, and it probably will clean up with a little bit of driving. It's pretty cool it being this paint color. My wife and I back in college when we had our first one, it was this exact color, and we never got the project done, didn't have any money. You know, this was like 10-15 years ago, and I had to sell that one. So, you know, so far things are looking extremely positive. This is about the quietest Volkswagen I've ever owned also, but it definitely does have that classic Volkswagen sound to it, which sounds like exhaust leaks, but you know, that's fine. Baby, no. Man, it just starts up just perfect. I gotta be careful, you know. I've known these Volkswagens to seem like they're gonna be okay, and then stuff sneaks up on you. But for the moment, everything seems to be okay. There's first gear. Whoop. Rear brakes are a little draggy. Flywheel's a little draggy, but it's moving. Leaving my property without my wife here to come save me. It's probably not the best idea. Oh yeah, the brakes don't work. Oh, the brakes don't work. Downshift. Does the handbrake still work? The handbrake works. We're fine. We're fine. Handbrake. Do a little Volkswagen off-roading. Oh boy. Yeah, this thing's going at like 300 RPM, doesn't care. What a tank. Now, I've been known to drive old cars like this, and compared to those, which we all know how sketchy those are, this Volkswagen feels very unsafe. Just like a complete bucket of bolts. Alright, so we'll start out in first here. And I mean, it's not fast, but it's spunky for what it is. Still could probably beat it with the Maverick in reverse, but you know, it's not what it's for. It's a cruiser. All right, my friends, I think that's going to do it for me today. It runs pretty darn good. I didn't want to get on it too hard because I don't have any brakes. I'm going to try and bleed them with my wife, and I'm assuming it's going to end up being the hoses, which really isn't a big deal, you know. On the spectrum of Volkswagens, that's pretty easy to work on, so we'll get that done. And then I think my wife will have a really fun little Volkswagen. And man, after having driven one for the first time in my life, I do have to admit, they're quite a bit of fun. And the fun, a lot of it is in like the novelty of the Volkswagen. It's not like anything else you'll drive on the road. It's a vehicle all its own, you know. For whatever it is, you can't really equate it to anything else because it's its own thing, you know. It drives like a Volkswagen. You know, for better or for worse, it is quite a bit of fun. I have to admit it.